Good morning, everyone. My name is Kara Berkschneider, and I'm the Urban and Small Scale Conservationist. And today, Kaylin Nichols, who's on the Huntington Tech team as the civil engineer, are going to be going over the irrigation water management plan for small farms and gardens. So today we're going to be talking about where the document's located, why we need the document, the benefits of having it, and how to fill it. We're going to go over an example of how to fill out the data sheet at the end of the plan. So where is the irrigation water management plan located? It is now on ePhotog. Yay! Just went on yesterday. It's in section 4 under Conservation Practice Standards, and it's under Irrigation Water Management. So it's located right here. And this is the front page of the document. This is what it's going to look like when you open that PDF. So why do we need an irrigation water management plan? Well, if you're working with a small farm or grower and they express interest in upgrading an existing watering system to make it more either energy or water efficient. So an example of situations like this would be somebody is currently watering with this system here. This picture is a good example of what we might see. So right now they've got a hose and a nozzle. Maybe they're filling buckets and carrying buckets to water. Maybe they're filling totes in the back of a pickup truck and they're driving those to water their crops. Maybe they have an inefficient overhead watering. These are all examples of a grower who could use an improvement on water efficiency. So you've got one of these scenarios, you're working with someone who has one of these scenarios, and they also meet the requirement of having irrigated 2 of the last 5 years, and they're interested in doing one of these practices, an irrigation reservoir, micro irrigation, so that's our drip. They're interested in irrigation water management, a pumping plant, a sprinkler system, which is our wobblers, or a water well. Well, then they have to have, per the conservation practice standards, they have to have an irrigation water management plan. Unfortunately, when we go into the TSP registry, we do not have any providers in Indiana to create these plans. So that's why one of the reasons why we're doing this. But we don't want to just do things because we have to. We also want to be providing a benefit to our growers. And so what benefit will the grower receive by having an irrigation water management plan? It comes down to the grower is, by reading this plan and having this plan, they're going to better understand the basics of different methods that can determine when they water and how much to water. Just those 2 simple things. So with this knowledge, that actually by doing those 2 simple things, they can grow better plants because they're providing the adequate amount of water. They can conserve a natural resource, which is increasing our water efficiency or energy efficiency, and that in turn is going to save them money. Let's go through the where and when to apply water and how much to apply water by stepping through this irrigation water management plan. The when is highlighted in blue. And just so you know, I've highlighted these for the training. When you open this plan, these highlights aren't going to be on here. So to determine when to irrigate, there's 3 different ways. They can either do that by using soil moisture sensors, by doing the appearance and feel method of soil, or by plant monitoring, by looking at the critical growth stage of the crops that they're growing. And then to determine how much water to apply, we're going to look at these different factors here in green. And so what this irrigation water management plan does is it just describes each of these blue and orange points to help the grower know when to determine to water and how much water to apply. So we go through each of these points and describe them. Estimating soil moisture with sensors, estimating soil by appearance and feel. This links to this document that steps through exactly how to do that based on their soil type, and it will give them a calculation, which we've got an example here of the calculation that's generated based on the way their soil feels at a certain depth. They can go through a calculation of how much water to apply. They do have to know, to do this feel method, the crop rooting depth of the crop that they're growing. And so we've got shallow rooted crops, moderately rooted crops, and deep rooted crops. So we have a table here that gives examples of some very typical crops that you'd see in a diversified growing system. To do the soil moisture by feel method, you also have to know the water holding capacity. So we go through and explain that. And then that third point of when to water is based on plant monitoring and looking at the critical growth stage. So we describe that here. And we go through what the critical stage of growth is for, again, some of our common crops that we see in these operations. One of the factors in determining how much water to apply is the management allowable depletion, also known as the MAD. And Kayla, when she goes through the data sheet at the end of this document, she's going to show you how MAD is incorporated into calculating how much water to apply. So this just describes what MAD is so that there's a description of it for the producer. How much water to apply also depends on the system distribution uniformity. So what's the spread of that water look like as it's going on the land? And then we have a section on factors that affect the when and the how much to apply. So some of those are, you can have irrigation-induced erosion. That's a factor to consider. You also need to look at water quality. Is the grower mulching? That's a factor that comes into play when determining how much water to apply as well. Do they have any water that's being contributed by the water table, a high water table? And then we have a section on other considerations. And this, of course, comes into play with our soil health principles here. Okay, last but not least is record keeping. We have a section on record keeping, and this is really important for you all as planners because this is taken straight out of the 449 Conservation Practice Standard, and it gives a list of all the items that are required to be documented every time a producer turns on the water if they are implementing irrigation water management, which is 449 right here. So what I want to really impress on you guys is that in order to do the irrigation practices that we listed at the beginning, you have to have this irrigation water management plan. That's all that you need. They don't have to implement this plan. If they want to do irrigation water management and implement 449, then basically they're signing up for a lot of record keeping. And that's okay, right? Some of our producers are great record keepers, but not all of them are. So if you're helping someone put together a conservation plan and they would like to do irrigation water management, make sure that they know that they'll have to record each of these items every time they turn on the water. So that brings me to, they just need the irrigation water management plan to implement those other practices. And so this template, this 6 pages that we just went through, that's the basics of the irrigation water management plan. In order to tailor it to their operation, they'll complete this page here, which is the data sheet. This was created primarily by Kayla, and so I'm going to turn it over to her, and she's going to step you through information, or step you through how to complete this sheet. Kayla, are you ready?
This is just basic header data here at the top. Because I envisioned that you would give a copy to your landowner after it's completed. It'll have your office and address and contact information, as well as the participant and all of that good information. Where you really start filling it out is here, what's their previous irrigation history? What are they hoping to do on their site? Are they trying to implement, are they currently managing with rows or beds, a high tunnel, or some other system that you can automatically type in? These are mostly checkboxes, and you can select multiple. You can change the area units if you, for acres, maybe your operation is a little more sizable than a high tunnel. A lot of these are best knowledge, right? So you may not know exact source flow rate, but you might know that they are on a domestic well, or maybe they have a separate irrigation well. If they know the source flow rate, that's great. That's really helpful for the designer who is putting together their actual 430 irrigation pipeline design, or they can refer back to that, or we can add it in after the fact once it's been designed. The pressure source, same thing. Maybe they don't know what their operating pressures are. That's really useful knowledge to have, but they might know that they have a pressure tank. And is electricity available on site? You might have a more remote location where it's going to be very expensive to run electricity, so you might have to select no, but hopefully the answer is yes. Here, I want you to describe your previous irrigation history. How have you been managing those 2 out of the last 5 years? What are your primary challenges? I realize it's only one line, so be brief. And then we get more into the technical data, which is your soil type. So I have here data from Web Soil Survey, because you probably aren't going to go out and probe the soil and get soil test bits. You're probably just going to go to CART or to Web Soil Survey, and you'll have a map unit symbol name, and symbol, and maybe a representative profile listed in the description. We've decided to focus on 3 crop rooting depths. Obviously, there are more crop rooting depths, and you can get that, but we've kind of lumped everything into either shallow crops, moderate crops, or deeply rooted crops. And those are kind of the breaks. You can pick your representative soil texture. I realize that it's not always going to fall evenly on these. You might have a mix down to like 12 inches, but just choose the most limiting one if you're concerned. Once you choose them, the available water holding capacity will update based on published values from NEH Part 652, the Irrigation Guide, and other published data based on texture. And it automatically calculates an example irrigation schedule for you based on the crop needs. So we had recommended 1 to 2 inches per week in the upper portion of the plan as being common. And typically I would say it's more like 1.5 to 2 is what we've been told to use for design purposes, just to make sure that we're meeting those crop needs if they change up their crops. You can list what kind of crops they're growing for each season. That doesn't automatically choose your crop water needs. You'll have to manually input that in. It's set as a default of 1.5. You can change that to 2. These MAD values, these are the allowable depletion. Is your root system shallow and kind of fragile? These are recommended values out of the NEH for those kind of high dollar vegetables. And that's probably what you're going to be seeing. If you had something like corn and you're looking at a larger scale, which you wouldn't use this data sheet for, it'd be something like 50%. But you can change these if you feel that it's more appropriate to use 30. That didn't change that, but if I used 50, maybe it would change. Maybe if I reduced my water, there you can see it starts updating that. So all of this calculates together to give you an example irrigation schedule saying that at the worst case, at your deepest crop needs, you are going to need to apply, if you have shallow rooted crops, 0.14 inches every single day. And there's no rainfall accounted. So you're in a high tunnel and you can't count on rainfall to irrigate your crops. You will be watering every day if you have shallow rooted crops. That's usually how it turns out. So coming down to this system, this is what you're hoping to do on the site. These are just check boxes. You can choose, hey, we want to implement some drip tape. Maybe we have another system on the same pipe that has emitters or maybe we need micro sprinklers for germination, or maybe we have some other thing we want to try that has come up. You can uncheck them as well. They're independent. Maybe you don't have the information for diameter or material of pipe, but you know you want irrigation pipeline. You can just leave those blank and check that if you don't know. And we can come back and fill it in later. Then you go to, maybe they want to look at some of these other practices. I apologize, that is my dog. She says she needs out. I will be right back. Maybe you need to implement some of these other conservation practices, and so you check them off and say, we want to look at some residue management and integrated pest management. The in-season water needs determined by. This is saying, are you going to go to that in-depth soil moisture sensor, or are you just going to use the soil appearance and feel method or judge by plant monitoring? And you can select multiple again. It's not either or. Your applied water volume rate, if they already have a flow meter, I would check that, or if it's planned. If you're planning to have a flow meter, which I think is under Structure for Water Control 587, you can check that. Or maybe they just say, well, I'm just going to time how long I run my drip tape. And you may not, these are default values. You may not have an idea of what their drip tape can actually supply. We can leave the default values. It gives you an error if they're zeros, but just leave the default values. We can change those later. And we'll just know that they don't have a flow meter and they're just going to use the duration to judge how much they've actually applied. A really important one is, do they plan on using an injection system to somehow, or their irrigation system to fertigate or chemigate? And if they check yes, you must consider backflow prevention. That's something that we really don't want to damage the source or contaminate the source. So it's got this handy dandy backflow prevention type. They will change based on what source you're coming off of. If you're coming off of a municipal water supply, they're going to be pretty strict, and it's going to be mandated by probably Indiana code or the specific municipal water district. If the answer is no, we'll probably still have some sort of single check valve if they have a pump, or we may need to consider it anyway. But definitely if yes, maybe if no. Down at the bottom, it just states that this plan was developed with the best available information, but it's not a hard and fast rule that they have to irrigate 0.14 inches every single day. It needs to be adaptable to the changing conditions in the field and the crop needs. But this is probably your worst case scenario. And then they'll sign and date it. Questions? Oh yeah, filling this out as with the producer is probably your best bet because it reminds you to ask these specific questions while you're going over their site. And we're going to do a bit of a demonstration. So in addition to all of this, you also have to attach a sketch of what their irrigation system currently looks like and what's kind of planned what you're proposing. So, sorry, page 7. There's a nice reset button up at the top, and I'll just go back to the defaults and we'll go through our example scenario. So, Kara, are you still there?
Yep, I sure am.
I'm going to pull up the map. I don't know if you can see the map real well.
That looks good. I can see that well.
Okay, so let's go through and I'm going to say, tell me about your operation. What are you currently doing on this site and what are you hoping to do?
Okay, sounds good. So, you'll be playing the part of the planner and I'll be playing the part of the farmer.
Okay, go
All right,
ahead.
so
Let's see.
go ahead, Kayla.
So I have here a map of your system. Can you tell me how you currently operate these garden plots and high tunnels?
So in field 1, you can see that I've got 4 high tunnels, and the 3 high tunnels that are going north-south, I have drip irrigation in there, and I'm very happy with that. And then in that little plot to the south of the high tunnels, I am watering with some wobblers, and that's working out well also. Recently, we've built the high tunnel that's going east and west, and we're irrigating that with a hose and water. And we'd like to upgrade. We noticed that we're using a lot more water by using just the hose. And so we'd like to upgrade and do wobblers as well as drip irrigation. The other field number 2, down in the southwest part of the farm, that the majority of the farm of that area, we are watering with we have a hydrant there, but we're watering with the hose and nozzle as well. It just takes us an incredible amount of time. We use a lot of water. Some of our crops wilt because I don't think that just depending on who's watering, a different amount gets put on. So we'd like to do just a drip irrigation out there, and otherwise we're pretty happy with our irrigation on the
Okay, so
rest of the farm.
how often do you typically water? You see yourself typically watering this field?
We do once a day.
Okay. And do you know how many years these have been in place?
Yep, we have watered the last 4 years with the
Okay.
hose.
Okay, so let's see. I'll just take some notes. You typically water with a hose once a day. I assume less if it's rained.
Yes.
Do you so you currently have 2 fields and are these both on the same off of the same source?
Yes, they're both coming off of a pipeline that's connected to the city water.
Okay. So one system and it's city water. Do you happen to know how much you're allotted through the city or how much you're allowed to take through the city, or it's just billable?
I do not know.
Okay, we can leave it blank. And
Great.
then,
Is that a problem to leave that blank?
no,
Okay, great.
we can fill it out later. So you have high tunnels, and it looks like these are in beds. Do you have any other managed rows or any other different way that you typically manage these?
No, we do everything in beds with aisles.
Do you have a booster pump or any other sort of pressure source that supplies those pipes, or is the city pressure enough?
The city pressure is enough. We've never had a problem with pressure.
And do you know what pressure you get at your house or not?
No, I
It's
don't.
it's no problem if you don't.
Okay, great.
We can look at typical city residential properties. And we can even test it with a pressure gauge. Is electricity readily available? or anywhere
Yes.
we would be on site? Okay.
Yep, we have it at both locations.
So I have a soils map of where you're located, and you can see that I'm going to just say that the majority of this is in this urban land Brady complex, which is what
Okay,
we call it.
great. I
And
haven't seen this soils map before.
typically, as mapped, it shows sandy loam down to a depth of 5 feet or so. Do you think that's accurate, or should we probably head out there and take a closer look?
It's really sandy and I know it drains well. And that's, I guess, some of the reason why we have an issue with
Mhm.
crops wilting is because it is really sandy.
Okay, I'll just enter this here. We'll call this sandy loam. And what kinds of crops are you growing?
Oh gosh, we grow all sorts of things. In the spring, we grow onions, lettuce, brassicas, spinach, carrots.
And are you
Uh,
growing all year round typically, or are
yes,
you,
we are.
so just basic vegetables?
Yep.
Are you,
Yeah, summer is tomatoes, peppers, summer squash.
and in the fall?
We do more lettuce, um, more carrots, brassicas.
And then what are you typically doing in your high tunnel in the winter?
We overwinter greens, spinach. Oh, I forgot to mention we do garlic in the fall. And then in the winter, greens, spinach, leeks, and carrots are what we have in the high tunnel.
Okay, so how we typically design our systems is that we design for the peak use of the crop, which is the worst case scenario. So typically we see that crops require at their peak use 1.5 to 2 inches per week. And
That sounds
that's
about right.
okay. So we'll just go ahead and leave these default values. This is the managed allowed depletion, and you can read about that in the main portion. It's just a level of risk. How much
Okay.
suction tension can that plant pull the water out of the soil before it wilts? So you can see here I have something in red, and it's because those very shallow rooted, fragile root systems are probably not going to be able to handle the sandy texture down to 6 inches, and you may need to water more than once per day. Um, so we could probably look at watering twice per day, or we could look at building your soil health and maybe doing some compost amendments to your soil.
Mm. I have noticed on areas where I've amended the soil with compost that it retains water more.
So if I change that to compost amended down to about 6 inches, then the worst case you'd see with no rainfall is typically you're going to still be irrigating once a day for those shallow rooted, tender crops. And the peak use would require about 1/4 inch every day.
Okay, great. This is so helpful. So what is the moderate and deep? What is that referring to?
So if you look at these crop rooting depths, you can refer back to the irrigation water management plan, and there is a list of different
Ah,
types of crops. Whoops. In this sheet, if I can find it, and I'm sorry, I'm scrolling fast. It talks more about common growth stages and critical growth stages, but here are the table 1 rooting depths of common crops. You can see that your lettuce mixes, your onions, your greens, peppers, spinach, they fall into this shallow rooted, kind of tender, fragile rooting crops. Whereas maybe your tomato is a bit more hardy and can handle a little longer routine. But what I would
Oh,
say is that it can still irrigate with the shallow rooted frequency. You don't have to do it every 3 days. This is the maximum storage of your soil. So you can still
okay.
irrigate every day for tomatoes, but if you had to, you could go every 3 days.
This is very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so
So,
let's see. We wanted to install, uh, you talked about installing drip tape in your new high tunnel. And we had talked about some problems with germination in your other
mhm,
field. Typically,
yes.
drip tape does not work well for germination. So you have to have some kind of overhead sprinkler system to get that whole soil base wet. Are you
Would
interested in?
Yeah, would that be like the wobblers that we have in the other part of the
Yes.
field? Oh, great. Yes, I would love that.
And then since you have some existing pipe, but not all the way, we'll include some irrigation pipe. And once we design the system, we can put in the diameter and the material of what's
Okay,
planned. Are you
great.
interested in, since you're on municipal, one way to get around some of the requirements of municipal water systems is to have an underground storage tank. Are you interested in storing water off of your high tunnels? Or
I would really like to do that. Does it have to be underground? Could I do above ground?
so it should be underground because we don't want to freeze it. I would recommend doing it underground, especially since you are growing in the winter.
Okay. I would just be interested in an above ground, just because I don't think that we want to do that excavation. So,
Sure.
um,
I think we can do above ground. I'll
yes.
have to double check that, but I would put it maybe in a high tunnel so that it extends the season, and then we would just have to make sure that you drain it once it gets real cold.
Excellent. That sounds great.
So if we're doing that, then you'll probably need some roof gutters, and you won't, since your tank is not buried, you'll probably need to use the removable vinyl ones.
Okay,
So that can direct the flow into the tank, catch it up higher, and gravity it down into the tank.
that's
Um,
great.
and since we're breaking the pressure, you will probably need a pumping plant in order to pressurize the system for your drip tape and mini wobblers.
So could that just be like a submersible pump that's in
Yes.
the irrigation reservoir? Oh, great. I've seen those. That's exactly what I was envisioning.
Okay. Well, I believe we can assist with that. And so we had talked about maybe improving your soil health. Are you interested in cover crops or residue
Yes,
management?
very much so. I'd like to do cover crops. I have been experimenting with them some, so I'd like to continue on.
Okay. Are there any other uh, interested practices that we had missed talking about?
I do some mulching, and I'd like to maybe expand the amount that I mulch. That's been really effective on retaining water.
Okay. So we can
And
look into maybe expanding your mulching.
and I think that's all I'm interested in right now.
Okay. So I'm going to head over to this section. Are you interested in soil moisture meters, or are you just hoping to maybe use the appearance and field soil texture method that we described in the plan up
You
above?
know, I read through the soil feel method, and I think that's what I'd like to do.
All right. We can go ahead and select that. And maybe visual plant monitoring in addition to that, you know, you see the crops are getting stressed.
Yes.
Do you currently have, I assume you have a water meter at your house.
Yes.
But that's going to serve your entire house and not really give you a good judge based on how much you're actually applying. Are you interested in a flow meter that could tell you exactly how much you're applying for irrigation, or are you more interested in just using your system components and judging based on how long you are applying water?
I think I'll just maybe start with the latter and maybe look more into the flow meter in the future.
Okay. So we'll do the duration of irrigation. Now there are some defaults here, but they won't be applicable necessarily to your new systems. So we'll take a look and make sure that we check out this application rate and the system efficiency of your new implemented system once it's designed. Once we
Ah,
change those values, it can give you an idea of how many hours per week you need to apply the crop needs. So if you had this application rate and this system efficiency, your irrigation time to apply 1.5 inches per week would be 7 hours per week, which works out to that one every day, frequency every day.
oh, I see.
So you do 1 hour a day to apply 0.21 inches every day.
Oh, so that connects that table up above that was also connected to my soil.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Do you have any plans of ever using an injection port or maybe a venturi meter for fertigation or chemigation to apply your chemicals and your fertilizers?
I don't think so.
Okay. So we probably still will have a backflow prevention type. It's since you're on a municipal system, that's going to be likely required by the South Bend Water Authority,
Hmm.
and that will probably be determined by code. So we'll have to look into that more.
Hmm.
Since you have an irrigation reservoir, most of the time, air gap or an RPZ is like the gold standard of backflow prevention, preventing cross contamination. So you have a reservoir, and it's really easy to achieve an air gap on a reservoir, on that storage tank. So instead of hooking up your municipal water directly to the pipeline and using that pressure, we're going to break the pressure in the storage tank, dump it in the storage tank, and use a float with an air gap, and then our new pump to operate the system separately from the municipal system. Does that sound reasonable to you?
I think so.
We can
Um,
also hook it up directly, but then you're going to get into trouble probably trying to hook up collected water. They don't like
is
to
that
see rain barrels hooked up to a municipal system.
okay. Is that something that I would get designs on?
Yes, we can look further
Oh,
into the design and
okay.
determine what's appropriate and what your needs are. If you need it hooked up directly so that you can irrigate all year round, or if we can get away with putting it into this
Oh,
just the storage tank and irrigating off of that and with an air gap.
excellent. So I don't have to make that decision now.
No, once we have it designed, if you don't know, once we have it designed, we will input all of the things that we didn't know, like pipe diameter, pipe
Ah,
material, application rate, system efficiency. And even though I might have you sign this now, we'll fill in the blanks later, or we can revise it later once we have an actual design.
oh, that makes sense. Great. Thank you.
So I think that should cover all the information I need, and it gives you a baseline idea of how this would be managed. Um, and then you'll obviously have more information once we go through the contracting period and figure out a firm design.
Great. This is very exciting. When I sign this, does it mean that I have to implement this irrigation water management plan?
No, it just means that we
Ah,
wrote an irrigation water management plan.
okay, great. Good. So this is just helpful information.
Yes. And obviously, even if you were to contract irrigation pipeline or the irrigation system, you're not going to irrigate exactly 0.21 inches every single day exactly. It's going to be based on what you actually are seeing in the field because different crops use different water amounts at different times of their life cycle. So you may need more, you may need less. It's based on your best judgment. It's based on rainfall. But this is kind of the worst case scenario designed for our irrigation system capacity so that you can provide that peak water use.
Excellent. Great. Well, Kayla, I thank you so much. This has been really helpful. And I'm glad that I have a starting point on how to manage my water.
Okay, so I have been ignoring the questions in the chat if they have any. All right, I think I don't see any. Okay. Are the irrigation
Okay.
reservoirs associated practices available if the producer has city water, as in your example?
Tim, yes, they are. And the reason for that, it's just because they have available water, we cannot deny them supplemental water. And so we have done that in the past, but what we realized is we were kind of going against policy by putting on that restriction. So you can do an irrigation reservoir when they have an alternative or an existing water. Great question. The irrigation water management plan is located in EFOTOG under Section 4 in conservation practices, and it's under 449, irrigation water management. Jenny asks, does the NRCS employee need to be level 3 certified planner to fill this out? Is there job approval authority for this practice? Jenny, we have discussed that, and I'm going to have to get back with you and everyone with an answer on that because I don't want to speak to the level of the certified planner on that. So I'll follow up with you on that question. That's a good one. Thanks. Okay, we really hope that this is a helpful document for our growers, and we also are excited that we can move forward with planning irrigation practices because of this plan. If anyone has comments or questions as they start using this plan and filling it out with the producers, then please feel free to contact myself. Or Scott Wagner, and we can help you with your questions on this. And we hope that it is helpful for you all. Thanks, and I hope you have a great day.